Alrighty, my friends, today we're going to be doing something extremely fun. Okay, we are doing quadratic equations. Now, this, my friend, we're probably only going to see one question on the real GED test. Maybe at tops 2 on this specific lesson. But the thing is, it's worth the most points. They expect you not to know the quadratic equation, mainly because it looks so intimidating to learn and do, right? But it's actually pretty easy, and it actually is pretty fun because it makes you feel like you're smart when you're doing it, right? So much math that's on the board that you're just like, man, I look like a scientist here. But it's actually pretty straightforward math, and you'll get it after this lesson, trust me. But you just gotta make sure you master it, because the first 2 are gonna be tough, or they're gonna be intimidating, like I said. But after you get a couple, it's just gonna be easy, and then it's free points on the GED, because you will come across 1, maybe 2 questions on the GED on this. So, first things first, the difference between a quadratic equation and an inequality and a standard equation, right? In a standard equation, we're given this, right? Let's say 4 or whatever. You should be able to solve for x. You should give me what x is here by using your skills of multi-step equations that you've already mastered, right? You'd combine these, you'd come up with an answer, you'd bring everything else down, then you would, whatever that is, you'd minus the 3 over there, and then you'd divide as your final step, and then boom, you'd have x, right? If this was an inequality, how can you determine this is an inequality? Because of the inequality sign, obviously. So this is an inequality problem. This is a multi-step equation problem. You can see what's what. But now, how do you determine when a quadratic equation is in front of you? When a quadratic equation is in front of you, you'll know it because one of your variables, aka the letter, one of your letters, the letter that you're solving for, will have a squared on it. That's how you determine you have a quadratic equation in front of you. Why is that important to note, my friends? It is because after this lesson, you're going to know how to solve quadratic equations. I guarantee it. And you're going to enjoy it. I guarantee it. The thing is, when you're on the real test and you're doing everything, you're going next, you're chugging along, doing all the questions, and you're given this, a quadratic equation, with the stress, anxiety of the test and all this and all that, your brain is just going to turn off, is just going to have a brain fart moment, and you probably won't even notice that this is a quadratic equation. They'll ask you, solve for x, right? And when you see that and you see the equal sign, you're just like, multi-step equations. So then you're just immediately like, boom, you happen to combine these 2 for whatever the reason, even though they're not like terms. You combine them and you end up with 5x, and you forget about that power. You don't even bring it down, plus 3, and then you just move on with the multi-step equation process, which is wrong, right? I want you to be, the hardest part of the quadratic equation lesson is knowing when it's in front of you and preparing to see it in front of you on the GED test. That's what I want you to be a master at. I want you to know the difference between a multi-step equation, aka a standard equation, right here in front of us, versus, boom, a quadratic equation. So, pop quiz. What's the difference between a multi-step equation and a quadratic equation? One of your letters has a squared. That's your answer when I give it to you. So, now that we've determined what's a quadratic equation, how it looks like, how do we solve it? How do we solve for the quadratic equation? They want us to solve for x. How do we solve for x? Isn't it the same way as a multi-step equation, Neil? No, it's not. It's a couple different steps, which I will write on the side here. Another bunch of steps that y'all need to memorize. I get some mixed messages on my steps whenever I create my steps for y'all. Some students like it. Some say, there's too much steps that I gotta memorize with each lesson, but it's what's needed, my friends. It's what's needed. So step 1, what you need to do is make sure one side is equal to 0. That's your step number 1. Make sure one side is equal to 0. That's what we're going to do here. What does that mean? Well, This is going to be your first introduction to the GED formula sheet. I will have this available to be downloaded, my friends, on Canvas, on specifically the right below this video. I'll probably have it, and I'll also have it on the worksheet section for you to download. There'll be a download link to download this PDF. You, from this point forward, are going to master this GED formula sheet, and I'll explain what this is, my friends, but make sure you download it. This is the GED formula sheet. You will be allowed to use this on the GED test. There will be a little button in the top right or top left corner saying formula sheet. You'd click on it and boom, this would pop up, right? They provide this for you on the GED, and it looks intimidating right now, but as we go along, we'll know what this whole thing is about. When you see a quadratic equation, you need to immediately pull this up, because we are gonna, for the first time, use our formula sheet, and we're gonna be looking at this specific formula right here. Do you see it? The quadratic formula. Is very convenient that it has the same name as our lesson. Quadratic formula, quadratic equations. You think of quadratic, just think of this right here. That looks like an intimidating equation, I know, an intimidating formula, but it's really not. Let's get to that in a second. Yeah, so here's the thing. There's another thing. The whole point of why I pulled this up was not only will you be using this, but this will be helpful too. Why do I keep on doing that? Let me put a little dot here. Right above the quadratic equation, there is that formula, the y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. That is what step number 1 is. Step number 1 is pretty much saying make sure your quadratic equation looks like the standard form of a quadratic equation, aka y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. That just means this right here. This y for us is going to be a 0. Okay, I don't know why they don't do that from the beginning, but we're going to put that as a 0 equals ax squared plus bx plus c. So we're looking to format our equation to look like that, and that's what step number 1 essentially is. Make sure one side is equal to 0. As you can tell from the formula sheet, it looked like this. They want us to match this right here. But it could be like that, or it could actually be, oopsie, or like that, ax squared plus bx plus c equals y. It doesn't matter. What we essentially want is one side equal to 0, aka y. So does this equation look like that? Is one side of our equal sign equal to 0? Right? Is there a 0 here, or is there a 0 there? No, I see stuff on this side and I see stuff on this side. So let's make one side equal to 0, because that's what step number 1 is. They want us to make one side equal to 0. So how do we do that? Well, use your skills of multi-step equation, my friends. We can move all of this, including this one, everything to that side, and then this side would be 0 equals, and everything got moved over there. But that seems a little too long. When we have an easier approach, we could just move this 4 over there to that side, specifically under its like term, which would be the 3. And that's what we need to do. We minus the 4, and then our new equation looks like this. Boom. Right? That's our new quadratic equation. Does one side equal 0 now? Yes. That is what your step number 1 is. And here's the thing, my friends. Most likely, specifically to the quadratic equation, one side will already be equal to 0. 80% of the time, step number 1 will be done. They love to give you a quadratic equation already with the 0 on this side. It's already done for you, right? So there's no need for movements of any kind. But that's most likely what you're going to see. But in case you don't see a 0 on each side, now you know what to do. Just do the opposite of the sign of whatever it is that you want to move, and move it. So this is my new standard equation, my friends, right? So now we move on to step number 2. Step number 2. step 2 is make a key. Make a key. All right. By the way, these steps I invented myself, so give me credit. Let me just push this aside somewhere. On the side somewhere, you need to make sure you write a key. A, B, C to be precise. Boom, boom, boom. So I did write it up there. Let's just go straight to the formula sheet because this is what you would be doing essentially. Remember this that we were trying to copy? We would try to morph the first initial quadratic equation that they gave us, and we morphed it into looking at it like this: 0 equals ax squared plus bx plus c, or in our case, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, right? If you notice, there's an a, a b, and a c. All right, those are essentially what the formula sheet is telling us. Those are essentially your numbers, right? The variables x and x there. It could be an X, it could be an A, B, C, D, it doesn't matter, X, Y, Z. It doesn't matter what the letter will be, but that is your variable. And essentially, that is the case here. If you really look at it, what is your A, B, and C? Your A, B, and C would be the 2, A, B, and C, right? Because the A is the number with the X squared, and your B is the one with just the X. Or again, whatever other number, whatever other variable, and then your C is just your standalone number. Do you see how that matches? Ax squared plus bx plus or minus, the operations never matter, C. You've located your numbers, which is what matters. And so you can tell me now what your A is. Your A in this specific case would be that first number, your 2. Your B would be your 3. And your C would be -1. Do not forget about the symbols always to the left of the number, right? These are +2. This is a +3. This is a -1. So make sure you put the -1 there, okay? The way you'll get the quadratic equations wrong is by forgetting your symbols. So make sure you keep track of that. So you made your key because... yeah, that's how you do it. By the way, let's say we came up with this as a quadratic equation, which can definitely be given. What would be your A in this specific case? An invisible 1. Do not forget about those invisible ones, right? But in this case, it's a 2. So, step number 3. After we made our key, step number 3 is... step 3, rewrite quadratic formula QF with parentheses in place of letters. Okay? Let's see what that means. Well, all that means is this. We go to our formula sheet again, right? Let's zoom in if we need to. Our quadratic formula is right there. We are going to copy that formula, and wherever I see a letter, I'm going to substitute it with parentheses. Does that ring a bell? I think that rings a bell for y'all. That is the simple rule that we came up with in our evaluating expressions lesson. So make sure you go to that if that doesn't make sense what I just said. But yeah, we're going to rewrite this, but wherever I see a letter, in this case B, B, A, C, A, I'm going to substitute it with the parentheses. So you'd be referring to your formula and writing down the formula, and again, in place of all the letters, write parentheses. You'd be looking formula to your paper, but I have memorized the formula, so I'm just going to write it here, and wherever I see a letter, I substitute it with parentheses. It goes -b, that's my first letter, minus the square root of b squared minus 4 AC, all of that over 2a. Told you I've memorized the formula. If you don't believe me, go look at it. There it is, right? We're not trying to copy the x equals. That's what the quadratic formula will help us solve for x. That's what that x equals is. So don't worry about that part. Just look at this part there. Doesn't that match exactly what I did? It does, my friends. Just in place of all the letters, there is parentheses. And that's what you're going to be doing in step number 3. Because in step number 4, if you can guess it, what do you think we're going to do? Step 4, input key into spots. You made that key, remember? You know what your A is. Your A is 2, your B is 3, your C is -1. Just put them in its spots, right? What is this open spot right there? Well, again, if you don't memorize the formula like I have, it's totally fine. You have the formula sheet with you. Just go to the formula sheet. The first letter was a B. What's my B? A B is a 3. So then a 3 should go there. What should go in this spot? Well, the formula says that spot was designated for B again. Right there, right? So I am going to go look at my key. B is 3 again, right? No surprise there. So you keep on looking at your formula sheet, right? I'm telling you, I'm just going to jump ahead right now. I know this was an A, C, A. So I just got to look, because again, I memorized it. My A is 2, so that's a 2, 1. My C is -1. I'll put a -1 there. Refer to your key always. And my A is 2, right? So this one was designated for the A. Boom! You filled in you've inputted your key into your quadratic formula. Guess what your step number 5 is? Step 5. Solve. How are we going to solve this, Neil? This seems kind of complicated. My friends, don't you worry. You have this little thing called a calculator, all right? You can just dump all of this into the calculator, yes, but I don't want you to do it exactly like that. No. If you try to put this whole thing in the calculator, it could be, if you make one mistake, you could come up with the wrong answer, and trying to input everything again would be a little difficult, right? So what I tell students is solve your 3 sections. That's what I like calling it. Your 3 sections. Your east side. Sorry, your west. That was your west side. The west. And then this one is your east side, and this is your south side. I like to separate those 2, or those 3, and I like to solve them first, just to make this big complicated mess a little bit less complicated. And then I'll tell you what to do from there, because this is a very, very unique symbol, the plus and minus sign. So let's solve our 3 sections. We're going to solve this section first. How do we do that? You could just dump it into your calculator exactly the way it is. Negative parentheses, positive 3 was in there. Isn't that what we had? Yep. And you could just do that, and the answer is -3. Boom. Plus or minus. Now we're going to put all of this into the calculator. That's going to be the tough part. So we pull up our thing. I see a square root sign, so I'm going to do second square roots. Again, if you don't have access to this calculator, there's a video on how you could download it for the free 90-day trial. Or is it 60 days? I'm not sure, but you could download this, and it actually goes over very quickly how you could master the buttons of it. There's also a lesson called Evaluating Expressions. Make sure you go look at that video, because that goes over, that is the lesson you want to go over to master the calculator. So we put the square root sign, we put parentheses, 3 parentheses squared minus 4. Don't use the negative there. We got to use the minus. That's an operation. 2 -1. And then boom. So you get the square root of 17, and it still gives you, as you can see in the calculator, still gives you the square root sign. Those ones might happen from time to time, right? And this example is the first example that I showed you for a reason, is because if you ever do this east side, this long square root sign, and the calculator still gives you the answer as a square root, you are essentially done. You just got to do this very last part, the south side, which is 2 times 2. I'm not going to use a calculator for that. Actually, let me show you what you would do as a beginner. You just literally put it always exactly the way it is, 4. You go to 4, and you're essentially done. You will see this answer as a multiple choice answer on the GED, in case your east side does come out to a square root, like in this case. So essentially, if you see a square root, you're just like, yes, I'm done, right? I just got to write it out like this, and boom, it's an ugly looking answer, but whatever. Neil says it ends like that, and you'll see that as an actual option. But here's the thing, most likely, when you do your east side, chances are you're going to come out with a whole number. You're going to do all of that we just did, all of that, and you won't come up with the square root sign. Most likely that's what's going to be. You're going to come out with an actual answer. Let's pretend we put all our east side in. Sorry, into the calculator. I don't know why I put that arrow. We put all our east side in to the calculator and dished out the answer of 5. The calculator had no square root, no nothing. The answer that it gave us was 5. They just dished out a whole number, and you're just like, oh man, now I got to do the next steps. This is all still part of step 5, which is solving, right? But we have to deal with this and this little symbol there, the plus or minus. This is why I made y'all do the west, east, and south side, so we could get this big confusing looking thing and make it less confusing. All I'm dealing with is 3 numbers now. This is where the magic happens right here. What you need to do, the purpose of this symbol right here is to do 2 operations. You need to do -3 plus 5. Whatever answer you get, divide by 4. So let's do that in the calculator the way you would. You would do -3 plus 5. Do not put divided by 4, okay? Do not do that. You got to push enter, get your answer. That answer you then divide by 4. 0.5, that's one of your answers for x, my friends. Please make sure you always convert and leave it as a fraction, because most likely you're going to see it as a fraction. So one of your values for x, remember, the whole purpose of quadratic equation is to solve for x. One of your answers for x is 1/2. But here's the thing. What we then need to do is come up with the other answer. Yes, that's right. The quadratic equations, when you come up with the whole number, when you do your east side section, will give you 2 answers. So what we now got to do is -3, and instead of doing the plus, we are now going to do the minus sign. So -3 minus 5. Let's pull it up. -3 minus 5. Enter. -8. Divide that by 4. And what do we get for our second answer? We get a -2. And just like that, when they ask you for the question, solve the following quadratic equation, or solve for x, you can say x equals 1/2 and -2. Because there's 2 value for x. That's the other difference between quadratic equation and multi-step equation. It always gives you 2 answers at the end. Do we want to do another one? You could stop right here and go on to the lesson if you think you got it, or just look at another, what's it called? This other example that I'm about to do. Okay, let's do this example right here. X squared minus 5x minus 14 equals 0. Step number 1, make sure one side of your equal sign is equal to 0. Like I said before, in this specific example, step 1 is already done for you. Step number 2, make a key. A, B, C. A in this case, I already know it's a 1. There's an invisible 1 in front of that variable, especially that first variable, x squared. Is 1, B is -5, C is -14. Perfect. Option 3, rewrite the quadratic formula, and in place of all the letters substituted with parentheses, you will have to refer all the way to your formula sheet at the beginning just to memorize that formula. And once you look at it and rewrite it, it should look like this. -b plus and minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all of that over to a. Once we get that, step number 4, punch in your key into each designated spot. In this case, this was a B, this was a B, A, C, A. Then you solve, and I tell students all the time to solve your 3 sections: your west, your east, your south. All right, and the calculator is going to be key here. You could do all your steps. You could dump that in exactly the way it is. Sorry. You could dump that in, minus parentheses minus 5. Oopsie. I'm just trying to copy it exactly the way it is. You let the calculator solve it for you. Duh, positive 5. Plus and minus. Now let's dump all of this into the calculator. What do we end up getting there? Well, square roots, parentheses, negative 5, parentheses, squared, minus 4, parentheses, 1, parentheses, negative 14, parentheses, enter, and boom, a whole number of 9. Told you. You were kind of hoping that it was a square root so you could just be like, ah, yes, it's done. But most likely it's going to come out with a whole number. And then you do the bottom, 2 times 1, that gives me my 2. And now you do your 2 operations, your plus and your minus. So you do 5 plus 9, enter, divide that by 2, 7. My first answer is 7. Then you go back and you do 5 minus 9, enter, divide that by 2, negative 2. Negative 2 is my other answer. And just like that, my friends, you've solved for your 2 values for x. X equals 7 and negative 2. You could also put it like this: 7 and negative 2. X equals 7 and negative 2. So that was your second example. Pretty straightforward, my friends. This was a long one. I'm curious to see who lasted all the way to the end. If you did, send me a message saying Rottweiler power. Send me that. And I'll know immediately you lasted to the end, and I'll probably surprise you with something, maybe with some extra credit. Even though you're not given credit in my class, it'll be extra credits. Somehow, some way, I'll find something to surprise you with. So, hope you all enjoyed, and see you on the next one.